All right, time for another deep dive. You ready to explore some cool vocabulary?
Always.
Great. Today we've got four words for you. Ubiquitous, faff, jazzed, and inundate. What I love about these words is how different they are.
Absolutely. Each one reflects a unique part of the language, its history, its playfulness, even how music shapes how we speak.
Okay, let's jump right in. First up, ubiquitous. It sounds kind of intimidating, right? But I bet you've heard it more than you think.
That's the interesting thing about ubiquitous. It describes things we see all the time. So common they almost blend in. The word comes from the Latin ubique, meaning everywhere. And that's exactly what it means today.
So, like, air is ubiquitous, or maybe those catchy jingles you can't get out of your head.
Exactly. But the meaning can change a bit,
Yeah.
depending on what we're talking about. Air is, essential.
Right, right.
But those jingles,
Well,
they're everywhere for different reasons.
I see, I see. So it's not just about something being everywhere, but also what it means for it to be so common.
You got it. Now think about how ubiquitous has changed with technology. 100 years ago, it might have been church bells in a village. Today, it's probably smartphones or the internet.
Wow, yeah, that's true. So the word itself is the same, but what it describes has totally shifted.
Right, it's fascinating.
That is really interesting. Any other fun facts about ubiquitous?
Actually, yeah, back in the 17th century, ubiquitous was sometimes used to talk about God, being present everywhere at once.
Yeah.
It shows how even a word about common things can have a much deeper meaning.
Wow. Okay, that is a new one. So ubiquitous can describe anything from the air we breathe to the latest trends to something, well, divine.
That's the beauty of language.
Okay, ready for a change of pace? Let's head over to the UK and explore some slang. This word is faff. It sounds a bit like something you do with a feather duster.
It does, it does. But faffing is more about all those little things that eat up your time without really getting anything done. Imagine scrolling through social media. When you have a deadline looming,
Oh, that's me all the time. Procrastination central. But wait, is faff always a bad thing?
that's a great question. It can definitely have a negative feel, like you're wasting time or effort. But sometimes a little faffing can be good, taking a break from work to clear your head.
I can see that. So, like, rearranging my desk might feel productive, but it's really just me faffing to avoid that big report.
Exactly. And it's important to think about the British culture here. They love a bit of self-deprecating humor, so faff might be a way of making fun of yourself, or just acknowledging those little quirks we all have.
Yeah, I like that. So it's not just the word, but how it's used. That gives it so much meaning. Speaking of meaning, any ideas on where faff came from?
The origin is a bit mysterious, like a lot of slang. Some think it might be related to faffle, which means to stutter. Others connect it to flaff, meaning to flap about aimlessly.
Huh. So even not knowing where it came from is interesting, adds to the intrigue. Okay, but let's get practical for our listeners. Where might they actually hear faff being used?
Imagine you're waiting for a friend to get ready, and they're taking forever. You might say, "Come on, stop faffing about, we're going to be late."
Or picture someone endlessly scrolling on their phone. Instead of choosing what to eat, just pick a place. Stop faffing.
Exactly. It's about that feeling of indecision or getting caught up in the little details. And it can add a little humor to those frustrating moments.
All right, we've covered ubiquitous and faff. Our brains are getting a workout, but let's move on to something a bit more energetic. Jazzed. Even the word sounds exciting.
It really does. And that's no accident. Jazzed comes straight from the world of jazz music.
Oh, I see. So we're not talking about actually playing jazz, but more about capturing that same energy and excitement.
You got it. Jazzed means being enthusiastic, ready for something fun, like that feeling you get right before a concert or when you're about to go on an adventure.
So if I said I was jazzed about this deep dive, it means I'm not just interested, but really excited.
Exactly. It adds a layer of intensity beyond just happy or interested.
I love how much meaning can be packed into one word. But is jazz only used when talking about music? Or can it be used more broadly?
That's the beauty of language. It's always evolving. While jazzed comes from jazz music, it's come to mean excitement in any situation.
So I could be jazzed about a new job, or a surprise party, or even a really good cup of coffee.
Absolutely. It's about that positive anticipation, regardless of what's making you excited. And that's what makes slang so great. It lets us express those nuanced feelings in a way that everyone understands.
It's like adding a little spice to our vocabulary. Speaking of which, what are some other words that have a similar feeling to jazzed? I'm guessing happy doesn't quite cut it.
Happy is a bit too general. Jazzed has a more excited, energetic feel. Think of words like thrilled, elated, or even pumped.
Okay, got it. I'm definitely adding those to my list. But before we get too carried away with excitement, let's shift gears to our final word for today. This one is inundate. And I have to say, it has a completely different vibe.
You're picking up on the nuance. That's great. Inundate definitely has a heavier feel. It's about being overwhelmed, flooded, even submerged.
So it's not just about having a lot of something, but feeling burdened by it. Like I could have a lot of emails, but I wouldn't feel inundated unless they were all urgent.
You're exactly right. It's about that feeling of being overwhelmed, not just the quantity.
So it's like the difference between a full inbox and feeling like you're drowning in emails.
Exactly. And the word's history reinforces that image. Inundate comes from the Latin inundare, which means to flood. It literally evokes a flood, which perfectly captures that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Wow, that's amazing. I never knew the connection to flooding was so direct. Okay, but let's bring this back to real life. Can you give us an example of someone feeling inundated?
Imagine a student during finals week. They have tons of assignments, deadlines approaching. That feeling of being swamped with too much to handle, that's being inundated.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that. Or a new parent, right?
Yeah.
All those demands and lack of sleep.
Absolutely. And it's not always negative either. Sometimes positive events can feel inundating, like winning the lottery. Suddenly you have all this attention and decisions to make.
That's a great point. So it's not about the experience itself, but that feeling of being overwhelmed by it.
You got it.
So inundate can be positive or negative.
It really depends on the context.
That's where, okay, we've covered a lot with inundate, and I'm starting to get a feel for how to use it. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, any other words our listeners can use instead of inundate?
Of course. Think of words like overwhelm, deluge, or engulf. They all have that same feeling of being swamped, but with slightly different shades of meaning.
This is fantastic. We've gone from the commonness of ubiquitous to the procrastination of faff, the excitement of jazz, and the overwhelm of inundate. I feel like my vocabulary is doing a victory dance.
And this is just the beginning. There's so much more to explore with these words.
Absolutely. But for now, let's give our listeners a chance to digest all this new vocabulary. When we come back, we'll delve even deeper into the nuances and explore how you can actually start using these words. Stay tuned.
And we're back, ready to dive even deeper.
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's funny, since we started talking about these words, I'm noticing them everywhere.
That's the thing about vocabulary. It's like you're suddenly aware of all these new details.
Exactly.
It's like upgrading your mental software.
You know, something I was thinking about with jazz specifically is how it connects music and language. It makes me wonder, are there other words that come from art forms?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the word melodramatic. It combines melody and drama, showing how music can really amp up emotions.
Right.
We use it to describe situations that are way over the top.
So like someone throwing a fit over spilled coffee.
Exactly. It's like they're putting on a show.
That's a great example. And that link to music makes it so much clearer.
It adds a layer of imagery.
It's not just dramatic, it's melodramatic.
Exactly. And it shows how language borrows from everywhere to create these richer expressions.
It's like a tapestry woven from all these different threads.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it reminds us that language is always changing.
You know, as we're talking, I'm realizing that knowing a word's definition is just the first step. It's how we use them that really matters.
Couldn't agree more. Take faff, for example.
Yeah.
We said it could be positive or negative, depending on the situation. Imagine someone saying, I spent all Sunday faffing about in the garden. That doesn't sound so bad, right?
No, not at all. It sounds kind of relaxing, actually.
Right. So understanding those subtle differences in meaning is crucial for using words well.
It's like being a detective, uncovering all those hidden clues.
I love that analogy. And just like a good detective, a good communicator knows how to choose the right words.
Okay, let's put our detective hats on. Let's try inundate and see how it changes. Imagine a news report saying, the town was inundated with tourists during the festival. That doesn't sound bad, does it?
It doesn't, yeah, you're right. In this case, inundated just means a lot of people.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that negative, overwhelmed feeling.
I see, I see. So being flooded with something can be good or bad, depending on what it is.
Exactly. Being inundated with love and support is great. But being inundated with paperwork, not so much.
So context is everything.
It's not just the word itself, but how it's used and all the information around it.
I'm starting to see these words in a whole new light. but I have a question about ubiquitous. We talked about how it's changed with technology. Do you think there's a risk that if everything becomes ubiquitous, the word loses its power? Like, if everything is everywhere, does anything really stand out?
That's a really interesting question. It's about how language reflects our world. You're right, if everything is ubiquitous, the word might start to feel meaningless.
Like when you see too many ads, you just tune them out.
Exactly. It happens with experiences, too. The more we see something, the less special it feels.
So how do we avoid that with language?
I think it's about being mindful. Choosing words that really capture what you mean. Instead of just using ubiquitous all the time, try finding more specific, vivid words.
So instead of smartphones are ubiquitous, I might say smartphones are an essential part of life.
Exactly. That's much more powerful.
It's not just stating a fact, it makes you think about what it means. This is amazing. We're not just learning new words, we're learning how language shapes how we see the world.
That's exactly it.
I'm feeling inspired, but I know our listeners are probably thinking, okay, this is great, but how do I actually use these words?
Let's get practical then. Let's give everyone the tools they need.
All right, sounds good. We'll be right back to talk about just that. Stay with us.
And we're back, ready to put all this awesome vocab to good use.
Absolutely. It's time to move from theory to practice. We've got all these great words, but how do we actually make them part of how we speak?
Yeah, good point. So it's not enough to just know what the words mean. Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like having a toolbox full of shiny new tools. You need to know how to use them. Think of it like learning an instrument. You can understand the notes, but you need to practice playing.
Okay, I'm ready to make some word music then. How can we actually practice using these words?
One great way is to imagine situations where you could naturally use them. Like, let's say you have a friend who's always running late because they get caught up doing random stuff. You could say, oh, you know how Sarah is, always faffing about before we can leave.
I like that. It's like a dress rehearsal for real conversations.
Exactly. And by practicing in your head, you're more likely to remember the words when you need them.
That makes sense. And what about making mistakes? I sometimes get so worried about using a word wrong that I
Yeah.
just don't use it at all.
I get that. But remember, language is about communication. It's not about being perfect. The goal is to express yourself clearly, not to sound like a dictionary.
So it's finding that balance, right, between being accurate and sounding natural.
Exactly. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. It's like learning to dance. At first it's awkward, but then you get the flow.
I can see that. Okay, so we're getting more comfortable using these words. Are there any specific situations where they're really useful?
Definitely. Ubiquitous is
Yeah.
great for talking about trends, things that are everywhere. You could say social media is so ubiquitous these days, it's hard to imagine life without it.
Or in an essay about technology, maybe?
Exactly. It
Yeah.
adds a level of sophistication to your writing. And faff is perfect for those lighthearted moments. When you want to tease someone about procrastinating.
Like, come on, stop faffing around. Pick a movie already.
Exactly.
Okay.
It brings a bit of humor to the situation. And jazzed is all about expressing that genuine excitement.
So instead of I'm happy about the project, it's I'm totally jazzed about it.
Exactly. It shows that you're really enthusiastic. And when you're feeling swamped, inundate is there to capture that feeling.
Like, I'm completely inundated with deadlines this week.
You got it.
This is amazing. I feel so much more confident now. But what if I come across a word, I don't know. Should I just avoid using it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
That's a chance to learn even more. Look it up, explore its history, even try using it in a sentence.
So it's about embracing that curiosity.
Exactly. The world of words is huge. And the more we explore it, the better we communicate.
This has been an awesome deep dive. We went from feeling overwhelmed by all these words to feeling excited about using them.
It's been a pleasure exploring these words with you. And remember, the key is to keep practicing, keep exploring, and never lose that curiosity about language.
Well said. Who knows, maybe one day we'll all be faffing about, effortlessly using all these new words in our conversations.
That's a great goal. Until next time, happy wordsmithing.